Okay, record that just in case somebody misses class and wants to watch it. Did anybody try and watch any of last time's? Did you? Was it was it bearable?
Yeah.
Okay, good, good. And the microphone doesn't always work the greatest, and I forget that there's people out there on Zoom. So glad you got some good out of it. All right, cool. Dave, you can keep an eye on if anybody else pops up on Zoom or has any questions or anything. I'd appreciate that. All right, Eric, have you used Kahoot on your phone? You want to jump on the free Wi-Fi here and go out there. I've got a couple of quizzes that we'll start off with. Oh, Siouxland Beekeepers on Facebook? Yeah, it's got to be group. Yeah, there's a there's a page that exists, but nobody pays attention to it. Yeah, wonder if we can get that taken down somehow, the page, because that just gets confusing. Okay. Yeah, 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 Facebook. All right, so I don't know if you guys have used Kahoot before. I've got a couple of quizzes we'll take real quick if you want to fire it up on your phone, and you're not graded or held accountable, or it's just meant to give you an opportunity to recall a little bit. Give me a second. Once I get it started, then yep, it'll generate a pin for us. Dean, would you mind clicking off the front lights? So Dave, is that full screen? Is that on what you're seeing? All right. Okay. We can, anybody who hasn't paid yet, we can deal with that later. I'm not in a big rush. So again, session 2 is out there on my website. I should mention if you go to the beginning beekeeping page, somewhere above this, there's a link to a PDF for a beginning beekeeping book. It's not the greatest book in the world, but it's free. So I always recommend, in addition to what you're finding in my slides, you should be getting other information other places. And it's I think it's Purdue that did the PDF. It's good quality information. It actually goes a lot deeper than what I can get. The pictures suck, but like I said, it's free, so it's a pretty decent resource. So I talked a little bit about myself last time, and since I'm going to ask you all to come up and tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're getting into beekeeping, I thought I'd go a little more into detail. I like to take pictures. I've been a hobby photographer for 30 years. It's probably one of the steps on my road to beekeeping was photography and nature and then organic gardening. My wife and I like to travel, go to the national parks and take some pictures. So the two pictures on the right, those are pictures that I've taken. And this one on the left is a picture my wife took of me and our truck while I was taking sunrise pictures in Grand Teton National Park a couple years ago. Notice how the truck is more prominent than I am, so we know who's important in her eyes. So I'm a computer programmer. I worked at Sioux Tools in Elf's Manufacturing. Worked at Elf's Manufacturing until they stopped U.S. operations in 2020, March of 2020. After that, I actually got a computer programming job for a nonprofit called Bee Informed Partnership. So Bee Informed Partnership was a national organization that they had tech teams that would go out and inspect commercial beekeepers' hives, try and identify diseases and issues and help them deal with them. If you've ever turned the news on and you heard that last year it was reported in the US that 39% of all bees died over the winter. That information came from an annual an annual loss and management survey that Bee Informed Partnership did. They did it for 17 or 18 years. Last year in October, they lost funding and they laid everybody off, so I'm no longer working with them. And I have to warn people that I was a programmer for them, not a beekeeper, so they didn't necessarily think I was a good beekeeper. They thought I was a good programmer. So I'm going to ask you at some point tonight to come up, and if you're nervous, by all means, say no, but come up and tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe why you're getting into beekeeping. We'll talk about where you're going to put your bees or where you are thinking about putting your bees. And again, I'll go first. So I got into beekeeping in 2009. I think I took the class in 2008 or 2007. In 2006, all of a sudden beekeepers, commercial beekeepers especially, were noticing their bees were disappearing. And they ended up calling this colony collapse disorder. And no one ever really did figure out the one cause, but it was a big thing on the news, and it was why I kind of got my attention wrapped around to bees again, even though I had been interested before. So I took the class, mainly, I wanted to help the bees, and it sounds kind of naive, and maybe it is kind of naive. I'm, one person, how much can I help the bees? But that's really why I started. Since I was a organic gardener, I kind of wanted to start out beekeeping without putting chemicals in my hive. I tried not to put foundation in the hive even, I went foundationless. These are top bar hives that my dad and I built, and I'll show you later a top bar. It doesn't have any sides, so the bees just draw the wax out from the point of the frame, and there's no input other than the wood that you put into the hive. I didn't want to treat my bees for mites. I thought maybe I could develop some bees that would build up some mite resistance. And as the years went on, it became more and more evident that it wasn't working. One beekeeper doesn't have enough bees to breed mite-resistant bees from. So I've kind of progressed to the point where I check all of my bees. If the mite levels are high, I treat them. If the mite levels are low, I don't treat them. And then I focus on those that I didn't have to treat, and I raise queens from those. I have been raising my own queens for about 6 years. I think I'm getting to the point where I'm starting to see my bees are a little more adapted to our area, a little better at surviving without the mite treatments. It's getting to be fewer and fewer of them that I have to treat, but there's still those outliers that I have to treat. So at least I feel like I'm doing something, like I'm on the right side of the equation. Even if I can't save the bees, at least I'm doing something to try and get that direction. These are my hives now. I use all 8-frame mediums. I don't really use the top bars anymore. I like the top bar hives, but they're a little bit more work. And the 8-frame mediums are a little bit more work too, but it's easier on my back. So I stick with them. I put up with the fact that I've got to buy more boxes and I've got more frames to go through when I'm going through a colony. So a lot of the class is about learning from your own mistakes. And this literally, these are my first 2 hives in the summer of 2009. And the second picture, that's where those 2 hives still are, January 1st, 2010. You see that little stick sticking up out of the snowdrift there? That's the top of that tree. So I had to dig down. I literally stood on top of them and barely could look over the snow, and put straps around them and hauled them up out of the snowbank and put them somewhere else. And I've never put them in that spot since then, and it's never done that in that spot since then either. So you will make plenty of mistakes. Okay, so let's do the Kahoot quiz, and then we'll have Mike and Connie Larson are going to come up and talk. They took the class 2 years ago, and you'd been beekeeping 1 year before that. So they're going to talk a little bit about their first few years of beekeeping. All right, let me get out of this. Get there eventually, I promise. Okay. Dave, can you see that in yours or do I need to share it? You can't see it? Okay. I was afraid of that. Where's my share? There it is. Better? Okay. Now you should all get a, should pop up a pin that you'll all need to enter. You might be able to use your mobile data if you're comfortable. Otherwise, the guest Wi-Fi should work. It's a little intermittent. Um, so he has to hit the play button on his end. Okay. Are you on there? No? I haven't been on that end of Kahoot for a while, so I'm afraid I'm no help. You want to just, oh yeah, you might be able to do that. If you need to come up here, it's on my screen too. That work? Okay, all right, here we go. Sorry. Yeah, it doesn't show you on your screen. It's only up here. That's annoying. I always thought that too. Yeah, maybe. that all of us? I think that's all of us. Oh, there it goes. Okay, most of us got that right. That's a lot of flowers, a whole lot of flowers. Okay, I'm going to speed this up a little bit. So here comes the next one. Is that how many of us there are? 7? There it must be. Awesome. The collective, that's the board. Sorry. No Star Trek fans. So I don't think I stressed that enough in the first session because that's come up years past and not everybody gets that right. So yeah, they do make it out of nectar. Yeah. Okay. Larry's still on top. Whoops. I skipped that, went too fast. It was true, right? Swarming is version of reproduction. Removable frames. I guess mite treatments could be a good argument though. Interesting. Yeah, and the main thing with removable frames, think about, when we kept bees in these baskets, kind of like a bell-shaped basket, they're open on the bottom. They would set them on a like a wooden something flat, and the bees would fill them up with comb. The only way to harvest the honey was to smoke the bees out or kill the bees, and then cut them out of these baskets. So when you get to a system where you can actually pull one comb at a time out without killing all the bees or destroying all the comb, it was a huge, huge improvement. Yeah, yep, dealing with the mites has only been the last 30 years. Yeah. Okay, awesome. Everybody got that one. Cool. Everybody got that one too. And I always found that fascinating that they can make that choice at the point the egg is laid. Okay, good. Most everybody got that one. Leaderboard hasn't changed for a while, has it? Good. And that gets, you'll realize how important that is when you're trying to get your bee population to peak right before that nectar flow so that you can make the most amount of honey. So, Good. I think we got one left in this one. Yep. All right. Good. All right. So who was that? All right. And there you go. And is that you? All right. Good job. All right. So we'll try and buzz through the next one real quick. If I can figure out how to do that. I think I'm going to have to stop my share just so I can back up. Okay. And so we want 1B. So there'll be a new code for that. Again, let me share it first. Got it, Dave? Thank you. Okay, that should be all of us. Okay, 2 to 3 weeks. What's the other one? Every week. You know, honestly, when you're starting out at once a week or a little more than once a week, it's probably pretty good. So I can see why quite a few people went with a week. Okay, yep, middle of June through middle of July. And depending on cold spring, wet spring, hot spring, that can change, but that's a generalization, I guess. Okay, here we go for the next one. Awesome. Cool. Yeah, you definitely can't pop the hive open when it's really, really cold, but you still can lift the back and see how much honey is left. Or either end. Good. Eric's holding the lead. Okay. There we go. Okay. I can see confuse the bees because masking the alarm pheromone kind of does confuse them. The way I've heard it explained really well, the smoke to the bees is kind of like if we're at a concert and you're trying to talk to me. It's I can kind of hear what you're trying to communicate, but over all the background noise, that's what the smoke does since the bees communicate with pheromones. It's like I can't really tell what you're trying to, I can't smell what you're trying to get across. So it keeps them from getting all riled up. Cool. Okay. Yeah. Whoa. Okay. So remember the chart that I showed with the number of frames of bees going up and the number of frames of honey, and then we harvested. So in February, March, and April, the bee population has gone down, but the honey stores have also gone way, way down. And they can't start making any more or bringing in any nectar until things warm up in April. So especially March around here is a time when a lot of colonies starve because it's been so cold and they've gone through all of their honey. So yeah, February, March, and April are very important times to, at the very least, lift the hive or lift one corner or one side to get an idea how heavy it is to tell if you need to do some emergency feeding or if they have enough honey to get by. Yeah, that got a lot of people, that one. Oh, Eric, you're right. You fell out. What do we got left? Three left. Yeah, for the most part, June and July. And that question may fool some people because, the two boxes that are out there as an example, that's what we use going into winter is, the two deep boxes. And that's where they raise their brood. That's where they've got their winter stores. Well, come spring, the bees will have moved up to the top of that box and the bottom box is probably empty. Yes, when it warms up, the queen starts laying eggs and they need space, but they have it because you've already left those two deep boxes on. If that weren't the case, if we like took them down to one box, then you might have to add a box early in the winter. Shuffled a little bit there. Two left. Awesome. Okay, good. Oh, now who won? All right, cool. All right, so hopefully those weren't terribly annoying, and you had some fun with them. All right, Dean, you want to catch the front lights? And Mike and Connie, are you guys ready to go at any point? All right. So
I guess our best advice would be get out while you can. Don't do this. No, I'd say for us, the biggest thing for us was we got into it because we learned a little more about the bees and the colonies, but then we started thinking it'd be pretty cool to produce some honey. And then our grandkids, we talked to them and they thought it would be a cool idea. So we started out thinking about the honey, where we found out easily in our first year, it's not about the honey, it's about the bees. You got to remember this is about the bees, and the honey will come. It may not come your first year, it may not come every year, and it may not come in the quantity you want, but it's all about the bees. And we've taken, I think, pretty good care of the bees. You know, we do windbreaks and we do insulation, a lot of things some people don't do, but we want to do every single thing we can to make the bees survive. And, you know, we're just, what do you think? Yeah, still learning. Still learning. It's, I think it's important to have a mentor, and you'll get that through this class. You'll have interaction with experts, and it's good to glom onto one of them because they're very good about even writing down to Odo, Iowa with us, right, John?
That's a fun trip.
And Dean, taking calls at all hours and anytime we need it. But it's a great community, I guess, and everybody's in it together. And it's not about my honey's better than yours or I produce more than you did. It's all about why did I not produce. Our first year, we lost everything. We thought we knew about doing mites, and we thought we had done all the preparation for the winter. And we came back in the spring, and all three hives, two hives, both hives were dead, completely dead. So we had to start over. And we became very diligent about, not that we won't get caught again, but about varroa mites, about the temperature, about the wind. And so we took every precaution. And then when we came around sloshing through the snow last spring or late winter, we walked across a part of our farm in the mud because we live in Sioux City and our bees are down in Odo. And we sloshed around. When we turned the corner, we were jumping for joy. Connie saw them first. They were all outside flying, all three hives, and it was wonderful that they survived. And we hope this year they do the same. But, you know, like John said a minute ago, and everybody knows that, and Dean said it, if you don't know. I mean, right now, we don't know. People say you can go listen to the hive and do all that. You have a stethoscope, maybe. I don't think just putting your ear up to it, I can't tell. But we hope they're surviving, and we've done everything we can so far.
We have a camera on our hives so that we can check them, but then the battery died, so now we have to go down and we have to get our battery and recharge it and take it back. But it's been a process. I mean, it seems like every year we do this, we learn something new or we change something and try to improve. But I think for me, probably one of the biggest things that I've learned since we started was to set a goal. I mean, why are we looking at the bees today? I think the first year we would just lift the lid and see what was happening and kind of really didn't know what we were doing. And then we took your class, which helped us tremendously. But now we have a purpose. Say, okay, what are we going to do today? What's our intent? And we pack our box very carefully because if we leave something at home, we're an hour away and we're out of luck. So yes. I think something too for me that has been different has been to take better notes. The first year we went down, we would come home and I had this calendar with the days of the week and I would make a note. My boxes were never big enough, so it was a real mess. But I've gotten to the point where we come home and we'll sit down and we'll say, okay, hive one, we did this. However, this year we're going to do it at the hives because sometimes we get home and we say, now did we do that on one or two? You know, so I kind of forget things. So that's,
It's interesting how you go back. Now that you have the notes, you go back and say, okay, when did we harvest last year?
yeah.
You know, we didn't want to call Dean and say, when did we show up at your house to harvest honey? But no, it's, yeah, I think, and the other thing for me was, you're gonna get stung, and I don't like it, but we got stung like, wow, one day was a mess. I was about to go in the pond. I had so many bees on me. We had a brush, we could not get the bees. I couldn't see my jeans, there were so many bees on me. And I was about ready to go in the pond until we got far enough away where they gave up and went back home. But take your time. When you're in that hive, when it's open, take your time. Sometimes we now just stand back, and we've found ourselves kind of kneeling on the ground and watching to see as they fly in, what are they flying in with? What color's the pollen? It's very interesting to take the time to really see what the bees are doing, because now we're really into it more for the bees in how that colony survives and who does what. And it's about the queen, and then, you know, but then you'll have some people in bee club when you go and you think the queen is very sacred, and everybody's protecting the queen and queen this, queen that, and then you'll find there's a pastor in one of our clubs who says, yeah, if the queen's not doing it, just kill her. I mean, just pinch her head off and kill her and move on to get another queen. So we don't feel quite that way, but he does. So no, you're gonna, if you don't know much about bees, you're gonna love this. But get into what it's all about with the colony and what bees do what, and you can see that once you open it up and take a look. And when you start to see or produce your own honey, it's not about the volume. It's about how good is the honey. Is it good for what reason? If it's not good or you don't have a lot of production, why not? But really, I just remember it's about the bees.
So what were some things that, especially in your first year, that took you by surprise or caught you off guard, if you remember?
Mites.
Mites?
Yes.
Some people.
We thought maybe the reason we lost our two colonies was because we didn't insulate well enough, but we tested them in the spring, the dead ones, and there were mites. We just thought, well, that's what we did wrong, and so we changed that the second year, and then we had three the second year, and they all survived, so we were thrilled about that. So that was good, but that was something that really threw us for a loop.
We had no idea how the mites could do the damage that they did. But, you know, most people, you take a test of live bees, and then you test for, you kill them, and then you see how many mites are on them. But when our colony was dead, we took the bottom of the box, and I just said, let's test that. They're all dead, but let's test it. And we tested them, you know, put them in the deal and shook it up, and God, it was black. So many mites. I'm going to say, and maybe I'm wrong, you guys can tell me if I'm wrong, but they will destroy your hive quicker than anything.
Certainly can.
Yeah.
So the time when you thought about going in the pond, you had so many bees on your hands, so was there an incident that led up to that, or they just gradually, because that's unusual, so I'm curious.
It was late in the day. It was kind of a cloudy day. And then we had that bee brush, or, you know, that brush they sell, that long thing.
Yep.
We did use that, and I told a couple of bee people that that's what happened, that we were brushing the bees off of the frames with that. And he said, oh God, you don't want to do that. They hate the brush. Don't do the brush. I said, well, why do they sell the bee brush? You know? It was terrible.
The reason they sell everything else.
Yeah.
So the way that I have used the brush, and I was maybe fortunate that someone told me one time, because I like gently brushed him off, and he's like, oh no, any more than 2 swipes and they get mad. So you just
One swipe.
1 or 2 swipes.
The last
If
2
you're
years,
gentle with the brush, yes, it rolls them in, and it probably gets alarm pheromone on the brush, and alarm pheromone will stick around quite a while. So even the next time you go to use your brush, there might still be alarm pheromone on it. So
we shake now, and it works well for us. We don't do a brush, but then I've also heard that not a brush, but if you use bird feathers, whether it's, you know,
I've heard that. Something
pheasant
that's
or
natural.
hawk or something natural.
Something
Yeah.
natural.
And it won't bother them near like a brush will. But they hate the brush. They hate the brush.
Ours
And then they hate me.
Yeah, and I talk to them. I mean, I try
Yeah.
and be really nice and I talk to them.
The worst
So
part
we
is
have-
when you have the whole suit on, and you know it's a fairly new suit, everything's closed up, and you're getting ready to look at the bees, and they're flying around you a little bit. And then there's a bee right here. And he's on this side of the screen, not on that side. Remember that one?
That did happen one
Yeah, he stung me about 6. Well, that one stung me. I got the thing off, and then the rest of them were, I got about 6 on the head that day. What are you laughing at?
time.
I was just gonna say, bees don't fly in a perfect circle, so if you're wearing a hat and veil and you hear a buzz going around in a perfect circle, yeah, it's on the inside.
Yeah, they're inside.
Yeah, they're on the inside. I was gonna say something, I can't remember what it was now. What were you saying before that?
Do we make the best honey in the world?
That wasn't it. I'll think of it later.
No, but you'll really enjoy it. I would say don't overdo it. Don't rush into it. One hive, if one hive's enough, one hive's enough. And again, don't worry about the honey that comes, because when it comes, around here, it'll be good honey. We have soybeans around where we are, and then we have alfalfa from all the farms around, and you can tell a little difference in the taste and color, I think, from depending on what the farmers plant. But
If you do get mites, do you have to like do something to the hive before you put the bees in it? Or is it something that won't transfer or?
Okay. So, and I'll get you guys used to this now. I like to back up before I answer a question. One, to make sure I understand where you're coming from, and two, to make sure you understand. So what I'm hearing, you're saying, okay, after my hive has died because of mites, okay, do I need to do anything before I put more bees in? In that situation, since they died from mites, no, because the mites died too. The mites don't survive in the equipment. Without any bees, the mites can't survive. Now, if it was a different scenario and they died from a disease, then you may need to do something. They're like American foul brood is a disease that will survive in the equipment for years and years and years, and you would burn that equipment. Some other infections, maybe you might throw the frames away, or at least scrape the wax off and start over, and still use the boxes. Sometimes you can scorch the inside of the box with a torch to kill anything that might be in it. American foul brood is kind of iffy whether or not you can scorch it and get rid of it. So if the bees died from mites, no concerns. You can put more bees in it. If the bees died from some other disease, yes, you may need to do something to contain it. And then the other thing is, you started out by if my bees get mites. Well, if your bees get mites, then you're going to want to treat them. And there are several different treatments that are out there, and we'll get into that in some detail later. So hopefully you can catch it before it's a huge problem and treat them, and they won't kill all your bees. So, does that answer your question? Awesome. Any other questions?
we also encourage everybody to join one of the clubs. We drive up to Sioux Center for that club, but it's well worth it. And sometimes they talk, Dean and the crew will talk at 30,000 feet, and we bring them back to 5,000 feet so we can understand it. It's like, but they're all extremely helpful, but a mentor is really good, because you can call somebody, you think the world's come to an end, and you call them and they calm you down and they say, do this, and I've been there and this is how you deal with it. So
We've also started to take pictures. If we're at the hive and we have a question or something, we'll take a picture of what we think the problem might be. So that helps us to get our questions answered too, if we can show the picture and say, this is what it looks like. Can you help us figure out what it might be? So the problem is taking a picture with the glove on.
Yeah.
Okay, quick, take your
Yeah,
glove
you
off.
take your glove.
picture.
Pictures are also really good when you're there trying to see something, because like looking for eggs, for instance, eggs are really small. You might not be able to see them with the naked eye, but if you can get a picture and then zoom in on that picture, you can see a lot of details in a zoomed in cell phone photo that you couldn't find or couldn't see with the naked eye. I remembered what I was gonna say. You mentioned you talk to your bees. So remember last week I mentioned Heroes for Hives, and that they have like some protocols, some different things that they have their veterans do, and they notice a significant improvement in mood and happiness and well-being and all of these things. I was telling them it's like therapy. Talking to the bees is one of the things that they recommend they do. And I thought I would feel so stupid, but if it helps, if it helps people feel better, feel stupid for a while and talk to the bees. They also talked about like inspecting a beehive like yoga, and that's more because if you're moving really quick and thumping things around, you'll make the bees mad, and they'll let you know. So it kind of forces you to move slow and deliberate, and that's kind of like a yoga or like a mindfulness or being present. And the other thing is, you talk about your first year, you go through the hive and you get home and it's like, well, you didn't really check for this or check for that. You didn't really have an agenda. I've been doing this for 15 years, and I still find myself sometimes looking at the hive going, man, this is really cool. This is really cool. Well, yeah, I'm supposed to be looking for this and counting this, but the bees are just cool. They're fun to look at. So you do have to have fun looking at them, but also remember you've got some specific reasons that you're in there too. Yeah.
And the bees will let you know. At least we can sense that now.
Yeah.
That if you're in there too long and messing around, you start to just sense that,
Yep.
the warbirds are flying, and you better let's get things closed up and move on.
Yep. Absolutely.
No, but this is a great
I
class.
also have gotten stung much less than he has. So.
I talk to them, but I use some swear words sometimes.
I call them ladies.
They don't like me to swear at
I
them.
refer to them as ladies. So.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good. This is good. This is a great class, and
Yeah.
stay engaged,
They're
and you'll have a lot of fun.
fascinating.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Well, good luck,
Yeah.
everybody.
All right, so at this point, you want to take turns, come up and tell us, and again, if you're uncomfortable, don't come up. Tell us who you are, why you're getting into beekeeping, why we didn't scare you away last week, and maybe where you're thinking about putting your bees.
I'm gonna pass this around first, though, since we talked about mites quite so much. This is a Varroa test kit, a jar. The way you test for mites is, I have a dollar dishpan from the dollar store and a plastic half cup. So you'll find a frame of bees that has like fresh brood on it. You don't want the queen in with these bees, but you'll set your queen aside or get a frame that doesn't have the queen on. Shake that frame of bees into this plastic tub with your half cup measurer. You'll take this little jar, which has a plastic screen in it. So I fill this up with alcohol, rubbing alcohol so far up to get it ready. Take your bees into your tub, shake them down the corner, take a half cup, put them in here, and put the lid on and shake this up. It'll kill those bees, which a half cup's about 300 bees. And then the mites will fall down in the bottom of this jar so you can see them. And inside this bag is some mites from a test. So you can kind of get an idea what you would be looking for in the bottom. You only want to have about 4 or 5 mites that had a whole lot more.
I'll get you started, John. My name's Eric Watchhorn. I'm from Ponca, Nebraska. Kind of been interested in beekeeping for it's probably been about 8 years now that I've been wanting to start. But I was kind of in a situation where I knew I'd be moving every couple of years because of the Army and jobs and stuff. So, but John kind of got me interested in bees a long time ago, actually. He's one of my dad's good friends. So I've helped John, I've helped him once, went out to his hives with him and stuff and enjoyed it. Not really afraid of getting stung, so there's a benefit, I guess, for now. But, another thing that we have a lot of gardens, so it's kind of the reason why I wanted to get into beekeeping now. We have almost probably an acre and a half or 2 acres of garden. And I think the bees will be beneficial to the garden. Not only that, but I've been really, for like the last 6 years, I've been starting to grow hops. And a reason why I didn't start that is also because of the moving situation. But I'm in place now. I'm not going to ever move again. Wood. And a while back, I read an article about the benefits that hops can be to bees, and that really got me intrigued. Apparently, hops put off some kind of acid that helps them be resistant to mites, which I found pretty interesting. So that'll be kind of a cool experiment. See if there's any truth to that. So.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah. Who's next?
I'm not.
I'm Jolene. This is my husband, Andy. We have been talking about bees for a few years now. We live just north of town on a little acreage. Mainly just to benefit. We have tons of fruit trees and gardens and that kind of stuff, and just something else to add.
So whereabouts north of town? My bees are north of town too.
By Horse Lake.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
By Horse Lake.
You've been volunteering.
You got it.
You want me to point the camera at him?
Yes. I'm Linnea, this is my Chris husband. He got drug along, so I don't have a good memory, so he's coming to help me remember. We moved to an acreage about, was it 5 years ago? Dave Corver, if I say that name.
Yes.
Was really good friends with his parents and asked if he can have bees at our house, and I said, absolutely not. We're not bringing bees. Bring bees here. But now our farm has turned into a funny farm, and I said, why not just try some bees? So on to our next fun adventure to see if we can figure this out.
So your attitude has softened up quite a bit.
Yes.
Is this north of town too?
We're out.
East of Hill.
Yeah.
Okay.
A little acreage out there.
You said it's a funding farm?
A funny farm.
Funny farm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got cows
I'm
and
familiar.
chickens and goats.
Pigs and
No peacocks yet, though.
he won't let me get those.
No peacocks.
You just
Too
bring them
noisy.
home. He can't tell you no.
Turned out to be right.
I'm Ian, and the reason I got interested in bees is basically just they seem natural, and anything that has to do with bees is kind of stopping pesticides or just anything you can do to help the environment and everything, like growing plants and everything like that. What really made me fall in love with bees, I think, was when I was reading about them, and they said that the queen, basically the mother of the hive, would just up and leave everything that she's grown up and made to her daughter and all her daughters and sons, I guess. And she'd just leave that and go build her own new one, and that's something that humans could aspire to follow, and yeah, bees are really cool.
Thank you.
Hi, Larry Christensen. I actually retired. Spent 36 years in the Air Force and then flew civilian for a little while and then just retired last year. So I thought this would be a good time to learn more about bees. I've actually been doing bees for about the last 6-8 years. But I think there's always something to learn to try to pick up on. And since I'm retired now, I might as well get into it and do it. Currently have about 4 hives, which, in doing the same things you're talking about, trying to figure out how to get them through the winter, that's probably my biggest problem. I'd get them through to about February, March timeframe. And then I'd go in there and look at them after that and they're all dead. So in the last year what I did is I just put them on a pallet, picked them up and stuck them in my shed. And so did that last year. It worked really good. And I did it again this year. I got 4 of my hives on a pallet in the back of the shed. And I can hear them in there. So they're still
Is your
doing
shed
good.
cold?
What's that?
Is your shed warm?
Yeah, no, it's a cold storage. But at least it keeps the temperature from it. It seems like when the temperature's doing this, that's when they really,
But it's cold enough that they stay inside?
well, no, I plug them all up.
You
Yeah,
will?
I keep them all
Oh,
in, yeah.
okay,
Yeah, I don't let them out.
okay.
You'll get 1 or 2 out every once in a while, but, that's about it. I'll keep them there until, hopefully the temperatures come up around 40-ish, and then I'll bring them back out. But it worked great last year. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
John, I kind of have a question based on putting them in a shed.
Yeah.
What about putting them in like a greenhouse?
It's a possibility.
What would be the risks, I guess?
They get too warm.
Yeah,
They
so,
fly, they eat all the honey that's You can keep them below that 40 degrees, keep them cold, just like they're outside, without the wind blowing on the fluctuation. But if it's too warm, then they wanna get out and fly and are active, or you keep them cold, they stay clustered and don't move and eat all their stores.
so, there's quite a few people that overwinter indoor, like Aaron Mallett, who sells at the Sioux City Farmers Market. He has built a building and he puts all of his bees in there. I believe he keeps it at 42 degrees all year long. So below 42 degrees, they have to eat more honey to stay warm, so they'll burn through the honey. Above 42 degrees, they're more active and they're eating honey just because they've burnt up the energy. So that kind of seems to be the sweet spot. His is enclosed enough that if you didn't refresh the air occasionally, there's enough bees in there that CO2 would build up and they would die because there's not enough oxygen. So, like in your situation, Eric, if you had like a 3-sided shed, something that was open to the south, and just let the bees fly, you can put them in that shed, you can keep them in there all year, really. The 3 sides keep the wind from blowing all the time and getting them really cold. The fact that it's open to the south means that it warms them up some, and then when it's above 50 degrees and sunny, they can go out and fly and take those cleansing flights. I might be concerned in your situation if they're plugged up and can't leave and it's warm enough, they might actually benefit from being able to go out and take a cleansing flight and come back. And I say 3-sided shed because if it's a 4-sided shed and there's just an opening somewhere for them to come and go, I don't know if they'll find their own hive when they come back into the shed. That's why the 3 sides is a good deal. I know Aaron Mallett, he has them on pallets, and when it's maybe 55 or 60 out, he takes the forklift and he puts them all outside. And then when it gets cold again, he'll put them back inside so they get that cleansing flight. There might be a situation where if it starts to get too warm, he can't cool the shed. If it's not cool enough, he's in trouble, so then he lets them out, lets them fly for a while.
That's what they do. When it does warm up, I'll bring them out.
Okay.
And it just won't pallet. And then it's gonna, just watch the temperature and it's gonna drop down and I'll bring it back.
Sure. Okay. Yep. Cool. One more. Thank you.
My name's Lance. I'm a signal technician for the city, so if you see the intersection flash, that is my problem. If the red lights are taking too long, that's not my problem. That's the engineer's fault. I live in South Sioux now, but we're in the process, we just got an acreage out on C60, out in the hills out there. So I've always been interested in bees, but now I had the chance to do something about it, try to raise some, I guess. So, yeah, we closing on acreage in February. As far as where I'm gonna put them, I don't know, but I have nine acres to play with, so.
Okay, you got some
Figure it
options
out,
then.
yeah.
All right.
Which which way on C60?
Okay, so what we're gonna do now, we're gonna split up into 3 groups. I've got some things up here I wanted to show you. Dean, you're gonna have something out in the atrium, and Dave has got something in the back there. And I'll set a timer. We're gonna spend about 8 minutes or so, and then I'll have you rotate. So you go to one station, talk for a little bit, and then come to the next one. Then we'll come back in and we'll discuss the session 2 slides that you went over. You want to give me a hand moving the table? Basically slide this one up against those. Okay. Alright, that'll work. I'm gonna sit down, stand up all the time. Don't have anybody on Zoom, but we got a recording. All right, so these are just basically some of the different frame options that are out there. The only difference in these two is the color. So these are medium frames. We haven't talked a whole lot about mediums. We've talked about the deep frames, like the 2 deep boxes that are out there. So this is a deep frame. We usually have 2 deep boxes for them to raise bees. And then above that, we usually start with the mediums where we put the honey. But I basically wanted you to see the different style of frames, different options. A lot of beekeepers use wooden frames with a plastic foundation in the center, and then this is coated in wax. What's nice about this, once you have the frame built, this is pretty easy to stick in, and it's fairly indestructible. I mean, the bees or the wax moths, if they get in it, they won't destroy the plastic. And, you know, it's easy. There's another version where you can actually put wax in the center. No plastics, all wax. But on a frame that big, they've got holes so you can run wires because it needs some support. Excuse me. So if you're worried about plastic in your hive, which I get some people are, then you might go with all wax, but it's a little more work to wire that foundation.
So could you switch that from that to wax at some point?
It'd be an issue with how you would attach it, because you see how this just has a groove, top and bottom. The ones that are designed for the wax foundation, this part will have been cut out so that you can put the wax foundation in, and then you put that strip of wood in and staple it to hold it up here. There's nothing in this one to hold it, so you could figure out a way, like you could pour hot wax in there and get it to stick. But if you were gonna go with wax foundation, you'd wanna buy the wedged top bars, is what they're called. This is grooved top bar.
What are the weight difference again when there's honey on these?
I think these are about 6 pounds full of honey, and these are 9 or 10. So there's a bit of a difference. And then this frame is totally foundationless. So there isn't any way to put any foundation in it. And it's got a little bevel or a V here, and the bees will follow that. As long as that's hanging down, the bees will build comb off of that, and they'll draw it down and eventually attach it down here and on the sides. So if you don't want to use any foundation at all, you can. These are a little bit hard to find, but you can buy them. If you go foundationless, you have to realize, where the camera can see it too, that bees will hang like this when they're drawing the wax out, and they use gravity to tell them what's straight up and down. And so if your hive isn't level, they'll draw it out like this, and it'll get into the next frame alongside of it. So if you go foundationless, you need to make sure sure that your hives are level side to side. Front to back isn't such an issue because they'll still draw straight, but side to side, you know, if you're crooked enough, they'll draw that down into, it's not, you can't see it on the camera at all anyway. So anyway, just a couple of examples and a couple of things to show you. This is a top bar frame. Remember I said I started out with top bar hives. That goes in the hive like this, and that's all there is. There's no side, there's no bottom. And again, they follow that point and draw the wax straight down. They do have a tendency to start to curve it when they get out to the outside edge. So even, you know, they might draw it out to here perfect, and then the next thing you know, it's attached to the frame alongside of it. And they all kind of wrap around that corner.
So when you see like honeycombs, like at the market or whatever, do those come from here, or can you get those off this too?
If
know
you
what they're
use
for, but-
plastic, you can't,
Okay.
because you wouldn't be able to cut through it. When you're buying honeycomb, it's both sides. So the plastic will get in the way. And that's one of the reasons I do quite a bit of foundationless in my honey supers. If it's a new frame and it looks really good, I'll make cut comb out of it. So I can just take a knife and cut all of this out, and it falls down on a cookie cooling rack on a cookie sheet so the honey can drip out. And then I cut those into smaller pieces that fit in the little plastic clamshells.
That's what you run for everything, you said, or not?
Not everything, but a lot.
You'll mix those and you kind of put a few of them in here there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you intermix the two of them?
You can. I started out all foundationless because all my frames were like this. And then when I switched to mediums, I started doing this and thinking that, you know, they would draw every frame out equally, and this keeps them from curving it. What they ended up doing is they don't like the plastic as well. They like the foundationless. So they drew all of these out first. And then they drew these out so thick, they drew it out into the space where this one should be. And so then I had drawn out frames, but they were really, really thick and nothing on these. So what I've learned to do is to put in an 8-frame box 5 or 6 of these and 1 or 2 of these. And that at least keeps them from building their home completely diagonal or something goofy.
So what's the benefit of doing one over the other besides the comb?
Personal preference. If you don't like plastic,
Yeah.
you know, you could do wood frames and wax foundations, or if you don't even want to do that, you can just do foundationless. It's a lot more management going foundationless because, like I said, you have to level the hives. They're still going to draw some stuff crooked. The other thing is this forces them to draw all of the cells out this size. These are worker brood size. Drones are bigger. We'll talk a little bit more about that, well, I guess tonight. If you let them choose, they'll draw out pretty random. They'll draw out drone cells out here and worker brood in here. And if you've already got a hive that's mostly on foundation and you put some of these in, they'll draw the whole thing out, drone size. And because they don't have drones anywhere else and they want to reach a balance of like about 12% drone. So then you've got a frame that's total drone cells that you don't really want. So there's management things or things that you need to pay attention to if you go that route. You know, but if you're totally all natural, no treatments, no chemicals, no anything, then top bar hive, they'll draw it all out themselves. They'll choose the size, they'll kind of reach that equilibrium. You'll just have to get used to cutting them apart so that you can pull them up out.
So what if they need a different size and they only have the one?
Okay, define need a different size.
So when you said that like these ones are like the size of a worker,
Mhm.
what if they need a drone then?
So if you were raising queens, you would need drones for them to mate with.
Yeah.
And if you did nothing but foundation, you might be limiting your drones. Most people see drones as not valuable because they don't make honey, they don't do any work. The other bees
They
just have
just
to feed them.
mate.
They just mate with the queens from other hives. So conventional beekeeping tends to try and minimize the number of drones in
Okay.
a hive. That's one of the reasons we use foundation, and they're all worker cell size foundation. It's also a convenience thing. If you have different sizes of foundation, then you're always having to figure out, do I want worker brood here or do I want drone brood here? You can buy plastic frames that are drone cell sized. The idea behind those is you put those in, let them lay drones in it, and then before they emerge, you pull them out. A lot of the mites will be in the drone cells. So you pull those frames out, you put them in a freezer to kill the mites, kill the bees, put it back on the hive and they'll clean it out and the queen will lay it up full of drones again and a bunch of mites will go in there. So it's a non-chemical means of lowering the mites. It's not terribly successful, but it helps. We should change. So Dave is lonely back there. Someone please go ask Dave some questions. Sorry, Dave, I wasn't paying attention soon enough. Nobody talked to Dave the first time around, so he's lonely back there. So I've just got a few different versions of frames for you to look at. So these are all plastic. I like these because I don't have to put anything together. If I get wax moths, they'll eat the wax. On a wooden frame, wax moths will chew on them and do some damage. They can't hurt the plastic. I'm not a fan of plastic. When I started out, I wouldn't even think of putting plastic in my hive. It's just, I've evolved to where these are so much easier. I like them. You were talking to Dave, so he told, or Dean, he told you about the different sizes. So we talked a lot last time about the deep boxes. These are medium frames. This style of wooden frame in the plastic foundation is also very popular because it's very convenient. So this has got a groove on the top bar and a groove on the bottom bar. That's all plastic. It's got the hexagon printed on it, and then it's got a couple coats of wax. If there's any wax on plastic bees, they don't know what you want them to do with it. You put wax on it, and then they get the idea, oh, we need to draw this out as comb. Sometimes you even need to put some honey or some sugar syrup on plastic wax foundation. Once they've cleaned the sugar syrup off of the wax, now it smells more like bees, and other bees will come and finish drawing it out. Those, when you have a little more practice than I do, those pop in and out pretty easily. And it's fairly indestructible. So these, someone earlier was asking, so what if you wanted to use wax foundation? So you can put wax foundation in wooden frames. But with this grooved top bar and grooved bottom bar, there's nothing for it to really attach to. So when you buy frames, you can buy them what they call them a wedge. So this piece is cut out. You put the wax foundation in there. You put this piece up against it and staple or glue both. So that kind of holds it in there. And then if you were doing all wax on the deep frame, you would probably want to run some wires through those holes. And then there's a tool you can embed that wire in the wax. So it's got some support. That's what's nice about the plastic is it's rigid. It doesn't really need support. This is a totally foundationless frame. There's no way to attach any foundation to it. And then this bottom bar is specially designed so the bees follow the smallest point, and they'll draw out a fairly straight comb. They tend to curve it when they get out towards the end, but for the most part, they'll draw that out straight and they'll follow that as a guide. And the bees, when they draw out wax, they hang like that. They call it festooning, and they use that to tell what's straight up and down. So like on their own, they will draw a comb that's perfectly straight up and down. If you don't level your hives from side to side and you use foundationless, what's going to happen? They're going to draw this frame out on the top and they're going to attach it to the bottom of this one. So you have to make sure you've got your hives level if you use some foundationless. Front to back isn't so bad. You know, it still does it, but at least it keeps it in the same frame, and eventually they'll fill that whole thing out. But side to side level is especially important. And then this is a top bar frame. I told you earlier I started out with just top bar hives. So that's all that's in it. There's no side or bottom.
Wow.
And again, they
They draw
follow
that
that
down.
point. But they get out to the end, they almost always curve it over. So as they're drawing it out, you might be cutting it loose and straightening it, or you just get used to every time you go to pull a frame out, you have to cut it. Eventually, if you've got some of these that are old, that you've cut out the curves, then they get to be fairly easy to take in and out. I like the top bar hives, but they're a little more management, it takes a little more time to inspect them. So that's just some different options.
So when we buy that starter kit over there, boy, does it come set up like this out here? It's on the table.
Yes, it can. That's where the example came from. And there's, I think the kit has got the frames assembled and the boxes put together. If you're handy and you want to save some money, you can put the frames together yourself, you can put the boxes together yourself. You can shave a little bit of cost off. But yeah, to make it easy, I usually recommend, so that I can get a cost estimate for people, I just buy this starter kit and buy this expanding apiary kit. And they're all assembled and painted. Frames and everything, frames and foundation.
I noticed the supers out there.
Yeah.
They had 9 frames in them. Do they normally have 10?
Normally they have 10. A lot of times what people will do in the honey supers, though, they'll put 9 and they spread them apart a little further. So this isn't a great example. So in the brood nest, the bees will actually, like if you didn't have any frames in there, the bees will draw the combs out so the center is actually 1.25 inches apart.
Okay.
These frames have been ripped down so that center to center, it is 1.25 inches apart. I planed them off. They're hard to find. You can buy them that way. These two, I've planed them off. So what you normally buy is 1 inch and 3/8. It's a little more than 1.25 inches because it's kind of a compromise. It's close. It's pretty close to the 1.25 inches that they would draw it out in the brood nest. In the honey supers, if the bees are given their choice, they'll go more closer to 1.5 inches apart. So center to center, closer to 1.5 inches apart, and they draw the comb out really thick. So my foundationless, in most places, down in my brood nest, especially where I'm forcing them 1.25 inches, I get, thin comb, center to center is 1.25 inches, and then foundationless frames that I put up in the honey supers, they'll draw out really thick and really big cells because this forces them to draw out one size. This lets them draw out any size they want. So up in the honey supers, I get some really big, really fat cells, and I will have a tendency to spread them out. I'm using 8-frame mediums on everything, so I don't usually go with 7. I don't know if I could draw them out that much, but in a 10-frame setup, 9 frames, easily you can get them to draw fatter and thicker. And there's one less frame you have to handle. One less frame you have to cut the wax cappings off to spin it out, but you get the same amount of honey because they'll fill the available space. So, yeah, that's fairly common that they'll use 9 and a 10-frame box.
Foundationless supers, when you cut them out and spin the honey out, you just leave them, or you take the wax out.
Cut the wax cappings off, which you have to get them to spin out. But what's in the frame, yeah, you leave and reuse. You might not get by with foundationless deeps and spinning, but I do get by with mediums, especially if they've got a good section attached on the bottom and a little bit on each side. If there's nothing attached on the bottom, I have had a few of them fly apart, spinning them out, but only 3 or 4. Not that I make a lot of honey, but I spun enough foundationless mediums through that I'm not concerned about it. If I pull one out of the hive and it's like this, it's not attached on the sides or the bottom, I'll leave that in there. It's not ready. It's not enough for me to. So I haven't tried to spin anything like that out. I have some that are attached like this much on the bottom and halfway down on the sides, and they seem to do fine.
Do you like the foundationless or?
I do, yeah. especially, somebody at the farmer's market kept bugging me for comb honey. And you look in the books and you look online and that's like, oh, it's like intensive management. You gotta put the box on at just the right time, and if you're late, they'll swarm on you. And if you leave it on there too long, they track up and down and people won't buy it. Well, I put a new frame in a honey super and I'm pulling, after the bees have filled it full of wax and honey, I pull a frame out, it's like, wow, that one looks really good. Oh, hey, that's brand new wood this year, so this is this year's wax. I put it in the deep freeze to make sure there's no eggs for small hive beetles or wax moths. Put it in the freezer for 3 days, pull it out, cut it, and make comb honey out of it.
What do you mean by comb honey?
Cut comb?
So it's just the comb.
Yeah, yeah.
Some people you just take a bite out of
Yeah.
the actual comb.
You can eat the wax or you can chew it until you get the honey out and spit the wax out.
You've never tried it, but it looks good.
Yeah, I pretty good. Dean might bring some in. He did last year. If I think of it all, I'll bring some in. Yeah, basically I'll set that frame, you know, it's all drawn out full of wax and honey. It's all capped. Put it on a cookie sheet with a cookie cooling thing on it. Take a serrated steak knife and cut the whole thing out. It falls down onto that. And then you take the knife and you cut it up into the right size pieces to fit in the little plastic clamshell. The excess honey drips down onto the cookie sheet. You can put it in the strainer later. But yeah, it's if I grab them and they're this year's and they look good, they look good enough that people at the farmer's market don't give me any trouble. So you don't really have to manage them real intensive and make them look perfect. People will still like it.
He asked, you said after you spin the foundation list out, you're left with the comb that's still in there, I'm assuming? And
Yes.
you leave that in there?
Yep.
And the next time they go to draw it out, it makes it that much easier?
Yep, so instead of having to draw the whole thing out, they maybe just kind of fix up some things you messed up and maybe clean it up a bit and then, yeah, start putting nectar, honey in it.
Pretty
And then they
cool.
just have to cap it. Yeah, so I'm not gonna get the figure right, but it takes something like 6 pounds of honey to make a pound of wax. So there's an awful lot invested in the wax, so the more you can reuse the wax and give it back to them, the better. Wax cappings, you know, you cut those off, you let the honey drain out of it, but they're still all sticky. You can put those back on the hive, like I put them in a top feeder. Some people just put them somewhere out in the open and let the bees open feed, but the bees will come and they'll clean every last drop of honey off of them. They won't take the wax and reuse it. Even left in the hive, they don't reuse wax that falls to the bottom of the hive, but they will clean all the honey.
And the
out.
wax is what people would use for like the candles and all that other
Yep,
stuff.
candles, lip balm, yep. All kinds of good stuff, waterproofing, yep. The wax cappings, since they're brand new, it's this year's wax every time.
Yeah.
Those are kind of prized for like lip balm and skincare products. You get an old nasty brown frame that you don't want to use anymore, you cut that out, put it in a solar wax melter, and you get the wax out of it. I would recommend you put that in a candle or sell it to Dayton's for foundation, not putting it in lip balm where somebody's gonna be having it on their skin.
They buy the wax, somebody buys
Yeah,
it?
they don't pay a lot for it, but yeah, Dayton's does buy it for the foundation.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Is there little presses or something to make foundation out of wax?
Yeah, so it used to be, people were really, really interested in that when I got started into beekeeping, because it was hard to find anything but 5.4 millimeter. Like these are 4.9, these are 5.4. People thought the smaller cell was better. So it was hard to find, but there was like some rollers. So you had to have the wax at just the right temperature and in a sheet, and then you rolled it through this thing that made the impression. These days, I think you can buy a silicone mold where you just pour hot wax in it, and then once it's cooled, you can pop it out. It'd be a lot of work. But you can buy different versions of different cell sizes. Premier up in Sioux Falls is making comb that it's more natural. I'll share in the email. The guy was just on a podcast. He talked about how he took samples of top bar beekeepers' comb, and I don't know, 100 different samples, and figured out how the bees are actually building it. And their plastic foundation is patterned off of that. You can see on these cells, see how thick those cell walls are? He said in nature, the bees never make the cell walls anywhere near that thickness, whereas this plastic forces them to at least start it that thick. And if you think about it, you've got little bees in each one of these cells developing, and that thick plastic insulates them from the temperature of the other bees. It could make a big difference. So the premier plastic foundation, it's shaped more like the bees do it. The cell walls is smaller, and I think it's small cell. I'm not sure if it's technically small cell, because there's some issues there with, if you measure across these thick walls, is it really 5.4 millimeter, because you're not really measuring the inside diameter of the cells. Anyway, we should probably get back together and go through
I
questions.
suppose if a guy had a 3D printer, you really go nuts on this guy.
I wonder.
I was thinking that earlier.
I haven't heard of anybody doing that, but you know, the perfect scenario would be like if you mimic foundationalists, my bees will draw out in the center of this, they'll draw out really small cells for raising bees. And then out here, they'll draw out some bigger ones for drones. And then here, they'll draw out really, really fat ones for honey. If you were gonna 3D print the whole thing, I'd go something like that. Not a whole lot of drone, but you know, 5 to 10% drone on every frame. That's what the bees want.
Yeah. I don't know anything about 3D printing, but somebody could go nuts.
I was looking at, you know, wax foundation, but then I haven't heard of these.
Sure. Yeah, and there aren't a whole lot of beekeepers in clubs who do a lot of it or know a lot of it. So let's get back together. And if you could, the closer you get up front here, the better off, because we're going to start talking about the slides from this week.
Is there somebody over here already?
No, wasn't anybody over there. There was 2 here.
Ironically, the way I remember about this class tonight, getting ready to take Harper to wrestling practice, and she had broke out, her face broke out from dinner, and Ashley was putting your propolis cream on, and Harper's like, "What's that stuff?" It's like, "Oh, it came from John's Bees," and I'm like, "Oh no, it's Tuesday."
It's a bee class night. That worked out pretty good then.
Yeah, I got lucky. Otherwise, I would have totally forgot.
So jump out to my website at some point and fill out the Google Sheet.
I did that.
You did?
I did it right before I messaged you. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right, because I didn't see it earlier
Or maybe,
today.
yeah, it was just before I messaged
Okay.
you.
That way I've got your email address, and I usually send out a reminder, and I probably have your cell phone, but I need to double check. And then like if we had a snow day or something, I can text people with the contact information. My voice is not holding out today.
It's like wrestling practice did a number on her.
Mm-hmm. Your dad helped me dig those bees out of that snowdrift.
I think I remember him talking about that. Actually, I would have been around still
So I think I got the date wrong here. So it was like New Year's Eve. I went out and I found them. And I dug down. I think I dug down to the point where I got to the top came up to your place to get your dad to help. You were making monkey bread.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
And I just remember you pulled it out of the oven
Oh, I remember that.
and you had forgot some main ingredient. I don't know what it was. And your mom started yelling at you. And your dad said, "You need any help?"
Yeah, I've never been successful in making monkey bread, so anytime anyone mentions a monkey bread story, I already know it's coming.
I have no idea why I remember that. I just thought of it the other day too, because you're taking the class and I'm looking at that
That's
picture
funny.
and it's like, yeah, Chip helped me. Chip helped me dig those up out of there. And it was cold. Yeah, we haven't had snow like that since that year. That was really
Have you heard about that hops theory before?
There is a mite treatment called Hop Guard that the active ingredient comes from hops. Now, whether or not that means you could put raw hops in your hive and make it work, I don't know. But
Oh, no, I'm not going to put the hops in the hive. I'm just going to have the bees buy the hops.
the bees
is the
buy the
plan.
hops. Yeah, whether or not
Still
that'll
do
be
the testing
effective.
and everything and see how it goes.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see that it could hurt.
Yeah.
But as far as like, yeah, there is an approved treatment and a researched dosage and all of that.
See how many I get planted this spring. It's an endeavor.
Yeah.
I talked to a few breweries around here though, and they're interested in
Really?
buying my hops from me. So I was like,
Cool.
okay, cool. Well, just tell me what you want me to grow and get it started.
Yeah.
The nice thing about those is they come back every year. on
That's
their
right.
own.
Once you get them established, they come back. I didn't get us split up into 3 even groups, so they haven't been out there yet. We'll let them finish up.
You make your own queens.
I've been raising my own queens, yes. Pretty good.
How's that work?
It's a bit of a learning curve. It's not really as complicated as most people think when they start looking online, like how it's done. Because you get online to see, you know, how it's done, and you find the right age larva, which is 2.5 days, or no, 12 to 24 hours, so pretty young. And you have a tool that you reach in and you take it up out of the bottom of the cell, and then you put it back down in this plastic queen cup. So the plastic queen cups, you can have a row of them affixed to a frame, and then when you put them in the hive, they all point down. We're kind of following some things that people have figured out. This is what happens in nature. This is why bees raise a new queen sometimes. On the bottoms of the frame, the bees will make these queen cups that point down. And the queen never lays in them unless she runs out of room. So remember the beginning of the swarming process is they run out of room. Well, the queen will lay in one of these cups that's pointed down, and the worker bees come along and they find this egg in a cup that's pointed down, and they raise a queen in it because it's pointed down. So we find the right age larva, we move them into these plastic cups, we put them in a hive with them all pointed down. We make sure there's a lot of bees in there because overcrowding is another thing that triggers the swarming. Plus, there's a lot of bees in there to feed the queens. Queens need to be fed really well to get good quality queens. So it sounds really complicated, but it's not once you have kind of walked through it a couple of times. And the other thing is, it's not the only way to raise queens. If you wanted to raise some of your own queens, you can do something as simple as split the hive in two. The queen will go with one half, the other half, as long as you give them the right resources, the other half will raise a new queen. You only get one out of it. You could find the old queen and take her and a few bees and move her somewhere else, and then the hive that's queenless will have all kinds of bees and resources, and they'll raise a lot of queens. you can go back in and you can pull out the frames with queen cells before they emerge, and now maybe you got 6 queens out of it instead of 1. So yeah, it's but it's a lot of timing. It's a lot of making sure that there are plenty of bees, because that seems to be the key. If you don't have a packed hive with a lot of bees in it, you won't get as quality queens.
You do that in like May?
May to June. You, I mean, if you were going to do it and like raise them and sell them, you'd be drafting like once a week, and you could do it out into July, maybe August. I think that the saying around here is once the dragonflies are flying, the queen mating won't be very successful. Not as many of them make it back because the dragonflies get them. So I don't know what time of year that is around here when they're real prevalent. We really don't have that many usually. But yeah, if you go too early, there aren't enough drones out there for them to mate with. So the guys that are chomping at the bit trying to do it early, they will actually take the drones, and you can squeeze them and figure out if the drones are sexually mature yet. As soon as the drones are sexually mature, then they'll start grafting queens because they know there's drones out there to support them.
So when you draft your queens, what do you do with yours?
For what stage of it? After I've grafted them?
Yeah, after you have a queen.
After I have a queen, okay. So you end up, before the queens emerge, you start splitting them up. So like I might draft 30 to 60 at one time. So then not all 60 are going to be successful, but a good percentage of them will be. So then before they emerge, I have to split them up, 1 queen per hive. So I've got some boxes with some dividers in them, either a divider in the middle or 2 dividers. So there's like 4 frames or all the way down to 2 frames of bees. So I need to find a frame of honey and a frame of brood and the adhering bees, and then 1 queen cell, 1 cap queen cell in each one of those. And I've been taking them down to the old Boy Scout camp for them to mate. So they're mating with some wild bees out there in the timber. And then I'd have to look at my calendar, but at the right time, I know when to go in and start evaluating. Is this queen laying? Is she good? I can either sell her or I can start expanding, because 2 frames of bees are going to run out of space at some point. A lot of times what happens is, let's say 50% of the queens aren't any good or didn't come back. Well, I can take those bees in frames and put them with the 50% that were good. And then you've got 4 frame nukes or 5 frame nukes, and you build them up. Hopefully they'll win. All right, so do we have everybody back? Everyone but Dean, okay. All right, so at this point, what I want to do is I'm just going to go around and ask you questions. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but if you're reiterating this information, you're going to learn it a lot better. And if you don't know, just say you don't know. Nobody in here knew the answer before they went through the information, so it's nobody's going to make fun of you. It's just pass if you don't know the answer. Most of everything that I'm going to ask has been in here, but we may talk about some things. I actually added a little bit to the slides as we were going, so there might be a couple of slides that you didn't see. So I'll just start over here. What are some characteristics that define honeybees as social insects?
The fact that they are, like, there's a group of them and they work together and they kind of talk to each other between like pheromones and all that.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So I guess the answer was right up there. Yeah, complex nest construction, environmental control, division of labor, communication, and defense of the colony. And not hugely important, but ants do a lot of the same things. They're very similar. So how do the bees communicate the location of the nectar source to other bees?
Oh, that was interesting.
Okay. Anybody else? You know
Does
it?
it smell off of the other bees coming back?
You know it.
I did, 'cause I thought it was really interesting. It's the way they vibrate and then the direction that they are vibrating with the sun, and that tells them what direction to go, and then how far far they're going on the comb is how far they need to travel.
Yep. All right, so.
That's
It's very fascinating. There's a lot of information there because there's a lot of information contained in this little dance. So the line represents the bee vibrates when she runs up the comb. And how long she runs before she turns around and comes back communicates how far the bee has to fly to find the nectar source. The angle from here to the sun tells the bee, you go out of the hive, okay, the sun is over here, so you fly at this angle to the sun, or you fly at this angle to the sun. And like you said, how long they do it is how far they fly. And then the next thing, after she turns around before she does the next dance, she gives out samples of the nectar. So the bee knows what it smells like, which you were kind of hitting on, knows how sweet it is, and then from interpreting this dance knows how far away it is. Okay. I think we covered that one. Yeah, you actually answered 4 questions.
sorry.
No, you're good. Okay, so something that's important when they're given the sample, you know, and they're comparing how sweet the nectar source is, and they also know how far away it is. So think about if, like my mom used to go to several different grocery stores, you know, she'd have the coupons, there's a sale out, and it's like, you know, meat is cheaper at this one, and eggs are cheaper at that one. She had that information because of the flyer that came out every week. Think about if you didn't have that information. You'd have to go to every grocery store to figure out who has the best price on what. Then you'd have to go back and do all of your shopping. The bees have figured out how to totally eliminate that because they give a sample, and the other bees, they're not just taking a nectar sample from one dancing bee, they're taking samples from several different dancing bees. And they're actually able to make an informed decision. Which one is the closest and the sweetest? That's the most economical, so that's the one I'm going to go out and fly to. I mean, it's incredibly sophisticated what it does for them, all the information they can gather. Okay. So you didn't know, so I'm going to pick on you. What are the 3 main castes in a honeybee colony, or the 3 main types of bees?
Drone, worker, and queen.
Yep. And how many of each? How many drones? How many queens? How many workers?
A lot of workers,
A lot of workers.
thousands of drones.
Yep. Yep. Very good. So what's the difference between a colony and a hive? All right, and it's a very small part of the text. So basically, the colony refers to the bees, and hive refers to the structure. So the boxes out there, that's a hive. The bees that go in that live in that hive are a colony. And I point that out because there is a difference, but even I will accidentally interchange them from time to time. But you know, for the most part, the colony is the superorganism that we're talking about, the colony of bees. And you probably wouldn't hear somebody say there's a hive of bees living out there in that hollow tree. It's the colony of bees living out there in that hollow tree. Yeah. Okay.
So each hive is considered its own colony. If you have 5 hives, you have bees living in all, and that's 5 colonies.
Yeah.
Not one colony that's living in 5 hives.
Right. Yep. Each hive has its own colony. Now, a collection of hives, you might call a bee yard, or the technical term is apiary. Aphis mellifera is the scientific name for bees, so apiary comes somehow from aphis. You'll see some things. Apiculture is beekeeping. So. Okay. So what's different, whose turn is it? What's different about the queen compared to the workers?
Queen can lay eggs.
Queen can lay eggs. Yep. Anything else? Anybody?
She
Doesn't barrel.
Doesn't fly other than mating flight, sorry.
She doesn't have a barbed stinger.
Doesn't have a barbed stinger.
Bigger?
Bigger. Yep. Yep. Yeah, you can visually, you can see it's different, longer abdomen. Yep. What's the queen's primary role?
I would say eggs and
To lay eggs. Yep. The other thing that she also does, not necessarily intentionally, but produces pheromone. Yep. Okay. Yeah, and the pheromone essentially tells the other bees in the hive that there is a queen present and everything's okay. We don't need to raise a new one. Okay. How many eggs can queen lay per day during peak season? 2,000. 2,000, up to 2,000 per day. Yep. Yep. Which is a lot. Either of you guys know on a deep frame how many cells are on one side? Do you remember? Is it 3,000? At least on one side. So, in 3 days, you could completely lay that frame up. And then this isn't in the text either, but if this was a frame of capped brood, once this single frame, capped brood, both sides, once all of those bees emerge, that's 3 frames worth of bees. So things can really kind of start to explode. So the wax capping, we'll see some pictures later. So like the cell is open when the queen lays an egg in it. And then as it develops, it gets to a point where they put a wax capping over the top and they finish developing under that wax capping. Okay. Okay, I think we're back to you. So how does the queen determine whether to lay, or when she's laying an egg, how does she determine whether she should lay a fertilized egg or a non-fertilized egg?
Based on the numbers in the hive?
No, based on the cell size. So drone cells are always bigger. And the queen actually sticks her head in the cell. 1, she inspects it to see if it's ready for another egg. 2, she measures it. And if it's bigger, drone size, she lays a non-fertilized egg. If it's a worker size, she lays a fertilized egg.
So who decides how big those cells are?
When you use foundation, they don't really have a choice. They have to draw them all out, this worker cell size. But in between frames, in between boxes, the bees will draw the bigger drone frames. If you gave them all foundationless, the bees will kind of reach a balance where I think it's around 12% drone. They want about 12% drone cells in the hive. That's why I mentioned earlier, if you take a foundationless frame and put it into a full hive that's got nothing but foundation, they'll fill the whole thing up with drones because they're trying to get to that 12% and there's no other place. So did that answer your question? Okay. Okay. What role do pheromones play in a colony?
Communication.
Communication, yep. So the queen pheromone communicates to the bees that the queen's there. The alarm pheromone, which isn't really in the text much, like when the bees get riled up, they let off the alarm pheromone. It lets other bees know there's a threat. Okay.
There's a
Nasinoff, yep, or Nasinoff.
pheromone too.
That one is like the location. So they'll do that at the entrance of the hive, so other bees know how to find the entrance. So Eric, how do bees tell the difference between queens or workers from a different hive?
I don't know.
You know? The smell, the pheromones. So each queen gives off a different pheromone. And they can even smell that on worker bees from another hive. Okay. What happens if a queen is removed from the colony or killed?
Start growing more drones and then the other females will start laying eggs. Right?
Okay. If it gets that far, So initially, within a few hours, the bees will notice that the queen is missing because the queen pheromone's not there. And they will try and find a larva that's the right age and raise a new queen. If they're not successful and they never raise a new queen, then the workers can start laying, and it ends up developing into drones because the workers haven't been mated. They can't lay a fertilized egg. So yeah, you're one step ahead of me, but you are
And then
correct.
that drone would mate with one of the worker bees?
No, the drones go out and fly and mate with queens from other hives.
So then how would they get another queen?
They won't. They're hopeless. When they get to the point where they've got laying workers, there's no way for them to save themselves. So that's where a beekeeper would have to come in and intervene. And laying worker colonies can be a challenge, a big challenge. A lot of beekeepers shake them out on the ground and let the bees just go back into other hives because it's really hard to get them to accept a new queen once you've got a bunch of laying workers.
Once again, it shows the importance of inspection, like every week or 2 weeks or so. Because you can tell if there's no young brood in there, no larva, there's issues.
How does the queen's genetic makeup affect the colony?
Are you talking about like the father and the grandfather?
A little bit. I mean, just thinking about, you've got one queen and she's laying eggs in the hive. So all of the bees come from this queen. So what effect can that queen have? Just based on where she's come from, what she's mated with. I'm not asking it right. So since all of the bees come from one queen, let's say if she's a good queen, then it's a good hive, right? If she's a bad queen, it's a bad hive. If she didn't get mated with enough drones and there's not quality variety in there, then it's going to be a bad hive. So maybe saying that, the genetics of the queen, maybe that's not the best way of get across, but the drones that the queen mates with have a huge influence on the temperament of the whole hive, the productivity, and just how successful the hive is going to be. I might need to think about a better way of explaining that. So how many drones typically mate with the queen when she's out on mating flights?
Per mating flight? Or I guess
Total, I think.
total?
Yeah, because she does go on more than one flight, but my numbers were total.
I believe it's up to 60 and usually more around 20.
Exactly, up to 60 and more around 20. Why does the queen only need to mate once or twice? Why is it just the first few weeks of her life is the only time she needs to go out and mate? No, she's able to store the sperm. So she doesn't have to go out and mate again because she's able to store the sperm for her whole life, the sperm that she needs. Okay. What makes a queen?
Yeah.
Sure. So the bees they all start out as an egg and then go to a larva. And they're all fed royal jelly as larvae for like 2.5 days. In about 2.5 or 3 days, worker bees get switched over to royal jelly, honey, and pollen. Queens get fed a steady diet, 100% royal jelly. Something about that causes or allows the queens to develop fully functioning ovaries and different abilities than the workers. Where are we? So explain the concept of a hot hive and what we can do with the queen if the hot hive is bad temperament, can't talk.
So hot hive, like they're angry.
Yep.
Um,
Defensive. Yep.
You could kill that queen and get a new one.
Exactly. Yep. Yep. So somebody else, why does that work? Changes the genetics of the hive. So if the hive all came from one queen and they're bad tempered, we put a new queen in there, the new bees will have the Sell you one for $40. What is the going rate?
Will they
30,
accept it?
35? You have to introduce them the right way so that they will accept her. Because yes, if you just killed one queen and put another one in there, the bees would recognize that that's not their queen and kill her before they recognize that they didn't have a queen anymore. So did you get to see the queen cages in the package? All right, so if you leave the queen in that cage, the bees can't get to her to kill her. They will feed her and take care of her, and when they're doing that, they start to spread her pheromone around through the hive, and pretty soon there's none of the old queen's pheromone, and there's all of the new queens, and they accept her. They used to say 2 to 3 days. You put the queen in there in 2 to 3 days. They used to like put a candy plug in there, and you just put it in there and let the bees eat the candy out. And you assume that by the time the candy is gone, they're accustomed to her. I don't know that the queen pheromone is as strong or as good as it used to be. Breeding is kind of weird. I say leave them in there 3 days before you pull the cork and let them eat the candy out. And there are things that you can do to look at and kind of see if the bees are trying to sting her or trying to feed her. If they're trying to feed her and not sting her, then they've probably accepted her. But it might take 6 days.
Another reason you need to inspect, because you can't just put her in there and come back in a month and hope it happens. You know, check in 2, 3 days. If she's still going.
So where are we at, Eric, I think? You wanted me to skip over you, didn't you? So if we put a new queen in the hive, let's assume after she's out of the cage and been accepted, how long is it going to take before her genetics change this hive and make it a calmer hive?
Probably 3 or 4 weeks.
4 to 6. So if the bees are living 4 to 6 weeks because they're working so hard, then after 6 weeks, the old ones will all be dead. Yep. What role, or what is the role of drones in the colony? Yep. What happens to the drone after he mates with the queen? He dies, unfortunately. What happens to drones in the winter? They get booted out. So there isn't any possibility they could raise a queen in the winter. That's not true. There's no way that the queen could go out and get mated in the winter. So therefore, they don't need the drones, and they're just more mouths to feed, so they kick them out. Why do drones have no fathers?
Because it's the queen lays an unfertilized egg. It's just her genes.
Yep. And I'll get to the picture. I just realized this is something that I added earlier on. So when we talk about communications, besides the waggle dance, there's also pheromones, which you did bring up, alarm pheromones and location pheromones. These also communicate through physical interactions, touching, buzzing, vibrating. So we've talked about the swarm. There's a ball of bees hanging in a tree, and the scout bees go out and they find a new location to move into. So the scout bees communicate the location of this new tree to move into with the waggle dance. So it's the same thing. They're vibrating up the outside of the swarm, the ball of bees, and then they turn around and do it again. And other bees watch them, and they figure out, okay, there's a potential hive over here, there's a potential hive over here, and there's a potential hive back there. They'll fly out and they'll check out all three, because they'll see 3 different bees dancing these 3 different locations. They fly out, they check out these 3 locations, and they decide this one's too small, this one's too big, it's the one back here that's perfect. Back to the swarm, and they see these bees dancing. The bee that's dancing to this one that's too small, they'll headbutt them. And the more bees that headbutt that one, the more likely it is to stop dancing that location. And so eventually, you've got just the bees dancing to this one location, because all the rest of them get headbutted to the point where they give up. And then that's how they pick where they're going to go. So there's another form of communication, is vibration and touch and aggression. So environmental control in the summertime when it's hot, the bees will haul in water and they spread that like on the bottom board or the sides of the hive. They fan it. This evaporation cools things down. That's one of the reasons we recommend you put a water source nearby, or if you're in town, put a water source nearby so they don't go to your swimming pool because they do need water all year long. Another environmental control, they will always keep the brood nest around 96 degrees. That's even if they decide to raise some bees in February. It'll be a small area. And in the summertime, they might actually have to cool it sometimes to keep it at that 96 degrees. Okay. We talk about eggs. So do you see the 2 eggs in one of these cells?
Yeah.
Right there. And you had evidently heard about laying workers, and I wanted to point out that this is not the sign of a laying worker. When you have a laying worker, there won't just be 2, there will be 9, or there'll be dozens of eggs when it really gets out of whack, and they'll lay on top of pollen. It's just crazy. The other thing that's unique about this picture is a few of these eggs are off center. And this is one of my pictures. This was a virgin queen, or this was a recently mated queen. Sometimes new queens will goof up a little bit until they start getting it right. So you'll see an extra egg in a cell once in a while, and you'll see some off to the side. Laying worker, a lot of times can't even get it to the bottom of the cell. It'll be on the side wall. Something I wanted to point out. Okay. So why do drones have no fathers? So this is representing a queen. She's got the full 32 chromosomes. Here's a drone. He's only got 16. The 2 mate. When the queen lays an egg, okay, if she lays a fertilized egg, it's 16 from her, 16 from the drone that she mated with. And the result, whether it's another queen or a worker, has 32 chromosomes. When she lays a drone, it's unfertilized, so it only gets the 16 from the queen. So I don't know if there's any other insect or anywhere else where something this weird comes along. The drones have no fathers. They only get all of their genetics from the queen. Okay. Where are we at? Are you sure?
I said I don't know in the last one.
What distinguishes worker bees from drones and queens? Differentiates worker bees from drones and queens. What's different about them?
It's the 16 chromosomes, 16 versus 32. For males,
Not
they
necessarily, because a queen, well, yeah, a queen has 32, a worker has 32. It's more physical.
They're bigger than a worker bee.
Okay.
They get bigger eyes. They sit on top of it versus the sides.
Yep. The drones have bigger eyes set on the sides. Yep. Okay. Yeah, I didn't ask the question right. I see what's going on. So I really didn't. So
They can't feed themselves. They can't take care of themselves.
the drones can't.
They're
Right.
pretty much worthless except for mating.
Right.
And like I said earlier, when the fall comes, they're getting worthless, so they're kicking out.
Okay. Yep. Okay. So specifically, worker bees, like worker bees to queens. What do worker bees have that queens don't? Drones don't either, but something else that I need to work on. So worker bees have food glands. Worker bees have wax glands, and worker bees have pollen baskets. The drones and the queens don't have any of those things. So these are things that allow the worker bees to do, a lot of the tasks, these stages that they're going to go through. They've got a gland that produces this royal jelly. That's what they feed the larva. The pollen basket's a physical attachment on the back set of legs where they pack pollen into it when they're out on flowers. And then the wax gland secretes wax. There's a picture in here somewhere that's an awesome picture, and these little pellets of wax they then chew up and chew in to these forms, the honeycomb forms. What's the role of the house bee in the colony? Got nothing there? All right. So the house bees are going to build comb.
Are those considered a worker bee?
Yeah, yeah, it's one of the stages
And
of a
your-
worker
Are
bee.
your scouts a worker bee too?
Yeah, the scouts, yep. Yeah, let's get past drones. So here we get into worker bees. Yeah, so the vast majority of the bees in the colony are worker bees, the female bees. Okay. Then, so the worker bees have these specialized structures. Food glands, wax gland, pollen baskets. Queens and drones don't have these. Okay. So here are the different stages or the different tasks that the worker bees are going to go through as they age or based on age. So they start out cleaning cells and keeping the brood warm. They move on in just a few days to feeding larvae. I guess they start with older larvae and then younger larvae. They're also going to take care of the queen because she's in the same area that she's in, so they're going to feed the queen. They move on to producing wax, building comb. They move food around the hive, so when a foraging bee comes in with pollen or nectar, they don't go and find a place to put it. They give it to another bee who then goes and finds a place to put it. So it saves the worker, saves the foraging bee some time. So these house bees at this point are moving food around. They progress to the point where they're guarding the hive entrance, and then that last stage is when they're a forager. They're going out of the hive and bringing in nectar and pollen and water. So how do the guard bees protect the hive?
By smelling the pheromones and identifying who's coming, and I would assume warn others and try to fight them off if they're not the right ones.
Yep, they basically hang out by the entrance or entrances. If there's a hole or something somewhere, there'll be some guard bees that keep an eye on it. And basically any bee that comes in that doesn't smell right, they'll investigate. There are situations where a bee will go to the wrong hive with pollen or nectar, and they'll actually let them in and let them offload. But if it's just a bee that's up to no good, somehow they know and they'll prevent them from coming in. They'll also stop wasps from coming in, and they'll stop ants, pretty much anything. This is a picture I was talking about, the wax glands. So it looks like there's a row of 3 glands here and 3 glands here. And there's flakes of wax on this one too. I thought that was I can't take credit for that one. That's an awesome picture. But that's the way they kind of flake off of the bottom. And then they chew those up and make the comb out of them. So is it possible for the bees to regress in this work progression? Okay. They can, but they're not very good at it. So like a worker forager bee can go back to feeding brood, but they're not as efficient at it, and the brood won't be well fed. And the situation where that might be necessary is like if you had a brood disease that killed a bunch of brood. Now we don't have any 2 or 3 day old bees to feed the new larvae, so the field bees have to do it. They can do it, but they're not as good at it. When you're raising queens, someone was asking about raising queens earlier, you want to try and get as many nurse bees in the cell builder as you can, because they're going to be more efficient at feeding these queen cells than foragers will be. So they can go backwards, but they typically don't unless they have to, and they're not great at it. I keep losing my place, sorry. Okay. What are the 3 development stages of the honeybee life cycle?
We have like the egg,
Egg, yep,
the larva.
yep. Egg, larva, and pupa.
That was
Yep.
something with a P.
Nope, you're getting there. And hopefully we'll get to see pictures of it anyway. How long does it take for the egg to hatch? 3 days.
Is that from the time it's laid?
Yeah, from the time it's laid, it takes 3 days for the egg to hatch. Yep. Yep. So Eric, what about the difference between, let's see, yeah, what's the difference? Oh, I'm not asking it right. What's the difference for a queen developing compared to a worker bee? Or some of the differences?
Takes longer?
Takes less time. for a
Takes
queen.
less time?
Yep. Yep.
And you mentioned they have their own little cell they go into on the bottom. It
Okay.
points down.
Yep. Yep. So it's a different cell than what a worker is developed in. Yep. And then the queen gets 100% royal jelly. So
Yep.
she never gets changed to honey and pollen. And I mentioned in the text that the queen cells are sometimes different than the worker cells. And the reasoning for that is in an emergency situation, the bees will go and find worker cells and they will fill that full of royal jelly and float the larva up, and then they start building the cell down. So queens always develop in cells that are facing down. If a hive gets really, really crowded, on the bottoms of these frames, the bees will put some wax, and there's usually cells that point down. When the queen runs out of space to lay up here, and all of the frames, there's nowhere to lay on the side, then she'll find these and she'll lay an egg in these cells that face down. When a worker bee comes along and sees an egg or a larva in a cell that points down, they're going to make a queen out of that. So that's one difference, is that the queen cells point down. Sometimes the bees actually find a regular larva and build that cell pointing down.
When they do that, they create a new, could be multiple queens at that point.
Yep.
What kind of problem does that present to the colony when they're, 3 days later or 2 days later?
So when they start building a bunch of queen cells, there's a lot of resources that go into feeding them. And then when the queen cells get to the stage where they're capped, eventually one of them is going to emerge. And the first one that comes out is going to run around and try and find the other ones that are still in their cells and sting her and kill her.
Oh, okay.
Because there ends up being only one queen in the end. So there's a lot of resources that go into raising all of these queens, and then there's only one mated queen.
That's hardcore.
Yep. So there are things you can do. If you know your hive went queenless, you can look at a calendar and you can figure out, okay, queen cells are going to be capped on this day. 4 days later, they're going to emerge. So if I go in there after they're capped but before they're emerged, I can split them up into 6 different hives and get 6 queens out of it instead of the 1. So there are things that you can do. So the queen, all the bees start out as an egg. It takes 3 days to hatch. Queens are larvae for just a little shorter, and they're a pupa for quite a bit shorter, and they will emerge about 16 days. Whereas a worker, it takes 21 days, and a drone is longer. A drone takes 24. So this queen, let's say, took 16 days to emerge. It'll take her 3 or 4 days maybe to go out and go on some mating flights, maybe another 4 or 5 days until she starts laying. So if it takes her around 21 days before she starts laying eggs, look what happens over here. All of the workers have emerged on day 21. This new queen is laying eggs on day 22, let's say. There's going to be 3 weeks where there's no new bees emerging. That can be a huge setback, depending on what time of year. If you're trying to build them up for this honey flow, and now they have a 3-week setback. So you may want to buy a queen if you really have your heart set on building them up at this specific time. A mated queen, if you can get your hands on one, can speed the process up quite a bit. We on you? Sure. Your turn. So why is it important to check the condition of the larva during a hive inspection? Okay, that's right. So healthy, well-fed larvae show you how healthy the hive is. The opposite side of that coin is brood diseases or bee diseases are going to show up in the larva first. So you can get an idea how the hive is doing based on how many frames of cap brood, how many frames of egg, how many frames of larva. That gives you a general idea based on quantity. But if you want to see a disease or see a problem, you need to get used to looking at the larva because that's where it's going to show up first. Why do we recommend you practice picking up bees with drones?
I don't know.
They can't sting you. So if you screw up, you're not going to get stung. And why would you want to pick up bees? Eventually, you'll get to the point where you want to mark your queens. There are little cages that you can use, and I injured a couple of queens using those and decided I just need to learn how to pick up queens. And not only that, every now and then, like if you get a queen in a cage, you might need to add some worker bees to the cage. So there are times when it's helpful to know how to pick them up. This one is kind of new. So royal jelly is never stored in the hive. Honey and pollen is stored. Royal jelly is never stored in the hive. Occasionally, a queen cell will have way more than what she can eat, but they don't stockpile it. So they produce it out of that hypophalangeal gland and feed it to the larva or feed it to the queen. What happens when a worker bee stings and why does it die from the sting?
Pulls the stinger out of the bee itself and then essentially loses part of the body. Yep. Can't survive without it.
Yep, pulls the stinger out of its abdomen, and a lot of times part of the intestine comes with it. And, yeah. And the bee that stings you doesn't die instantly, couple minutes, but they do die. What are the signs of a severe allergic reaction to a bee sting or to anything, really? Swelling, yep. Hives.
Ironically.
Yeah, ironically, hives. Yep. Yep. So you were asking somebody was asking, what's a larva? What's a pupa? So the larvae are little C-shaped in the bottoms of the cell. You can see these are kind of swimming in royal jelly. Oops, wrong way. So somebody has taken the sides of the cells off. Those are pupa. And those are under the cappings. That's what I was.
Is that up and down like this then?
The picture is oriented so the bees would be this way, and so this it's been turned for the picture. So up here above their heads, that's where the wax capping would be, and then their butt basically is up against the center of it. So they develop with their heads facing out, and then when it's time for them to emerge, they actually use their mouth to chew that wax and crawl out that direction. But that's the different look. These are getting to where they're a few days probably from emerging, and they'll be all brown and like what you're used to seeing when they emerge. A few days before that, they were this worm-like looking thing.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? All right, let's play this. I forgot about this. So this is, again, how easy it is to pull a frame out when it's all contained within one of these as opposed to having to cut it out. So these capped cells, those are all capped brood. And you notice it's got a little bit of a brown color to it. So they put a little bit of propolis in with the wax cappings above the brood. Over here, this is capped honey, and this is capped honey. This isn't great, but you can start to see the difference between the wax cappings on the honey and the wax cappings on the brood. And then you can't see it yet, but I'll zoom in. But this area is all open brood or larva. This whole side is open brood. Again, it's not close enough for you to see it, but that's all larva. Okay. Honey, capped brood, open larva in between, open larva up above.
So is the honey like what they eat then? Or what's-
Yep, or they eat some honey. Sometimes they're feeding it to the larva, the older larva. Sometimes they're just eating the honey and the pollen so that they can produce royal jelly.
So do you want to see capped honey here?
Yes, yep. And the bees will put some here. There's no pollen in this picture, but a lot of times there's a band of pollen underneath the honey because they keep it close to where they need it. They need to eat pollen, they need to eat honey, and feed brood. And they also feed some pollen and some honey to the older brood. There'll be a drone bee. I'll try and stop it and show you the drone. But most of these are all workers. There's a drone right there. It's bigger and its butt's rounder. It's going to walk back down here in a second. And this one's going to think about feeding it. So this is all capped brood that she's walking across. These holes in the center, you'll see quite a few of those. If you see a lot of them, then there's something wrong with the queen. The queen is failing. But there's a certain amount of them they leave so that bees can get in there and generate heat and heat all the brood all around them. So there again, capped honey, capped brood. And these are open brood. You get out to this area, it's probably open honey. Now in this area, you can start to see the white C-shaped larva. Those are probably just a few days from getting capped, from being old enough to be capped. This is a plastic frame that's yellow, and the sun's shining on it, and it's giving it a yellow tint. So this brood is usually pure white. This picture has just got a yellow cast to it. Okay, so I wanted to go a little bit into the bee stings. So swelling and itching, local to the bee sting is pretty normal. If you start getting a non-localized reaction, like you get stung on the left leg and your right arm swells up, that's concerning and that's something you want to pay attention to. Some of the other signs are anytime you get hives, experience tightness in your chest, difficulty breathing, you should seek medical attention. It's only like 1% of people that are allergic to bee stings, but it's pretty important to the people who are. It can be life-threatening, so you want to take it serious. Anytime I'm in the bee yard with a new beekeeper and they get stung, I make sure I check on them every 5 minutes or so for a while. If they don't know how they're going to react, it's something you want to pay attention to. So signs to look for are skin reactions, including hives, itching, flushing, or pale skin. Itching at the location is normal, but the flushed skin, pale skin, is kind of concerning. Difficulty breathing, swelling of the throat or tongue, weak or rapid pulse is another sign. Nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, dizziness, fainting, loss of consciousness obviously is a pretty severe sign. And if you have a severe reaction, your chances of going into anaphylactic the next time get more and more severe. So if you or someone with you has one severe reaction, pay attention to it because it can get worse the next time. So I keep an EpiPen. I need to get a new one. It's expired. I keep an EpiPen around not because I am concerned about myself, but if someone else in my bee yard or someone in the class is in my bees, and worst case scenario, it's good to have an EpiPen. If you've got kids that are around the hives, especially kids that maybe have some kind of allergies already, if you talk to your doctor and tell them that you're getting into beekeeping, they'll probably give you a prescription for this. This is not a real EpiPen. This is a tester that came with one of them. So I'll pass it around so you can get an idea how to use it. You have to pull this off of the top. You have to hold your hand on that, and then you're supposed to put it in your thigh. The way this tester works is if you don't hit hard enough, that won't come out. So you actually don't have to hit real hard, but if you don't do it hard enough, the needle's not going to come out and inject. If you don't take this thing off, it doesn't come out either. So the real EpiPen has got that in there so that it doesn't go off accidentally. So I'll pass that around and you can practice. Okay. That was all my questions. So does anybody have any questions for me yet? Same thing for next week. Make sure you go through the slides for session 3. I think that you learn more if you have to read it beforehand and then we talk about it. I can sit here and read them to you, but I'm not very good at it, and you won't get as much out of it. So, anybody learn anything that surprised them this week? The foundationless beekeeping or foundationless frames. There's not a whole lot of people around here that are doing it, but you'll find quite a bit online. I like it. I mean, my main goal was starting. I wanted to do it all in the brood nest, but they don't always draw it real small, and so then I started putting these in first, and then once these are drawn, then I put a foundationless in between, and then they draw out some really nice straight brood frames. But I like it for the honey supers too, because like I said, I can make comb honey out of them pretty easily. So in the same section where my session slides are at, session 2, session 3, there's also this one that's called normal or abnormal. We won't get too far into it tonight because I know it's getting late, but you might want to start taking a look at it. I went to one of the state beekeeping meetings a couple of years ago and sat alongside of a doctor who's a beekeeper. And she was explaining to me how from being a doctor, she's figured out you have to see normal about 1,000 times before you can start to recognize abnormal. So the only way for you to start realizing or noticing when your bees have a problem is if you've seen normal frames quite a few times. So it's out there if you get a chance to review it. This is chalk brood. You would normally find these chalk brood mummies on the bottom board. Not somebody has turned the frame on the side and laid these on it. But you will sometimes see them stuck in the cells. It's not a huge problem, but we do see it occasionally, especially when things are wet. Okay, this is normal. These are eggs. These are larvae that are probably 2 days old. See how small they are, a little C-shaped. These are a little bit older. This is a little bit older. See how there's a little white, shiny something in the bottom of all the cells? Thank you, Dean. So that's the royal jelly. This is abnormal. This is European foul brood. So see how there's a little bit of yellow tint or off tint to some of these? See how this is just plain brown? There's actually C-shaped larvae in there, but they're brown. They're not the right color. Another thing that's kind of an indication here, these are laying down in a weird position. And then there's eggs right alongside of older larvae. So this has been going on for a while. The queen has come back after they cleaned out an old one and laid eggs there. Normally, the larvae in the same area are roughly the same age. So this is a normal frame, and this is trying to point out to you that this interface between the capped brood and the capped honey, that's where you want to pay attention because that's where the eggs and the young larvae are. And the young larvae is where a lot of the things show up first. Okay. This one is chalk brood. Earlier stages of chalk brood, they're not all dried up and mummified. See how they're kind of like they're melting down into the bottoms of the cells, and they're not the pure white color. Brie cheese. This looks like brie cheese, and that's definitely a sign of chalk brood. This little thing here is actually a bee's head. They call it shrunken head. That's another symptom of chalk brood. That not only is normal, that's a gorgeous frame of capped brood. See how there's a few holes, a few open cells. Again, the heater bees go in those cells and they heat up all of the bees around them. So you'll see some of that. That's normal. That's normal or abnormal depending on situation. That's a capped queen cell. See how it's pointing down and how much bigger it is than the rest of the cells. So that is a little bit abnormal because see how big these are? These are capped drones. So the bees have redone things on this piece of foundation. They drew out some larger cells and the queen filled them up with drones. A little bit of that is normal. You'll see it. A whole lot of that is a little different. This is a terrible color because it's got that yellow cast again, but this is a really great indication. Remember I said the closer together, bees are usually the same age. So these are all capped larvae. These are all older capped baby bees. See how big these are? Those are about to be capped. As you move your way out here, you see how these larvae get smaller and smaller? They're younger. You get out here and there's eggs. So the queen has basically started in the center of the frame and she's spiraled all the way around. So the older bees are in the center and the eggs are in the outside and the in-between is in the middle there. That's abnormal. So that's a spotty brood pattern. See how there's all these openings? They're not all capped. This is just a really old frame. It's foundationless and they drew out brood cells here and drone cells here. Not something you'd normally see, but there's an explanation for it. This is European foul brood, a bad case of it. You kind of start to see this one, even the cappings are different. They're sunken. European foul brood, again, that brown, that weird shape, and the eggs right alongside that older larva. European foul brood again. See lots and lots of brown larvae. That's another gorgeous capped frame. So do you notice the difference between this one and the last one that I showed you that was a full frame of capped brood? Yeah, this one's got capped honey across the top, quite a bit of it. And you can tell this is capped brood because it's a different color than the honey, right? It's a lot lighter in color than the other frame. The other frame was pretty old. This looks to me like it's a brand new frame. He's just drew this out. In the first year, maybe 2 years, the wax is lighter and then it starts to get darker brown as it ages. That's gorgeous, healthy larvae. Look at all the royal jelly on those. They're all floating in pools and they're all white and shiny, bright. There again, that's a mature queen cell, so it's normal in some circumstances. Those are queen cells. Those just happen to be on the edge of the brood nest, and there's quite a cluster of them. See the shrunken heads again? That's an older, dried up one, but the shrunken head, so that's sac brood in this case. And there's a developing queen larva. You can see the C-shaped larva in there. The queens look the same, only a little bit bigger, and they move through the stages faster. And obviously the cell is different. There's a nice frame of healthy brood. This one is really nasty. The cell is all runny. There's even moisture on the outside of the cappings. The cappings are sunk. There's a whole bunch of blank spots. So that's American foul brood. American foul brood is one you really don't want to get because you pretty much need to burn the equipment to get rid of it. It lasts forever. There's American foul brood again. See how the larva has really melted down to the bottom of the cell? And it's all brown. There's a nice frame of capped brood. That one's parasitic mite syndrome, which has lots of problems. This is actually a mite. This, I think, is a mite. There might have been one somewhere else. This is just pointing out some capped drone broods. You see how they're taller and bigger. They'll look like bullets. If there's only a few of them, it looks like the cap of a 22 or a pistol bullet. That's European foul brood, a bad case of it. So look at those. Like I said, until you've seen a lot of normal frames, you won't really know what an abnormal one is without looking at these, and I'll quiz you on them later. Anything else? Sorry, this ran a little bit later than what we normally would, but we got a lot covered, I think.